my man Martin Frank who's been doing a great job covering the Eagles all training camp long. Good morning, Martin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How about you guys?
We're doing fantastic. There never goes a day in Philadelphia sports where something doesn't come up that creates a new story to talk about. Like I was just saying a few minutes on this show, like the script of the show just writes itself. 5 days a week, 90 minutes a day. Like there's always something to talk about. And the
Yeah,
Jalen Hurts story has just created another element to talk about this week.
yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Been talking about this before. There's some NFL cities, whatever teams 4-12, nobody care, or 4-13 now. Nobody cares. When's the off season? But like, even if the Eagles are like 4-13, it's like always a soap opera. There's always something going on. It's fascinating, actually. Always something to write about, always something to talk about. As I'm sure you're well aware these last few days with the whole Jalen Hurts stuff. So yeah, it's fascinating.
So I obviously wanted to bring you on to get some thoughts on some players and the obvious preseason game upcoming. But I obviously have to ask about this Jalen Hurts article and stuff. And it was a very in-depth article. And it was a lot of things that we all kind of thought, knew, kind of already had the understanding that these problems already existed last year. The big problem that I had with the article, and something that I've taken a lot of flack on social media for expressing this let me preface this by saying I'm a huge Tim McManus supporter fan, always respected his opinions and coverage of the Eagles. I thought the timing of the article being released at this point in training camp, with everything going so positively, all the vibes going high, everybody saying and doing the right thing, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni seemed to be on the same page. I thought the timing of the article was a little off. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have two thoughts on that. Number one, it's probably like whatever happened last year, the collapse, so to speak, the dysfunction between Hurts and Sirianni. I mean, that's going to be a topic until the Eagles prove that it's not a topic.
Okay.
And the only way you can do that is when you actually play some games and, you get off to a really good start and, things seem to be working under Kellen Moore. And so far, we've seen that kind of in the preseason. Jalen Hurts has had a great training camp so far. That can't be denied. He seems to be, playing at a different level than he was last year. I mean, that's all true. As for the timing of the article, I think the reason why Tim wrote it stems from what Jalen Hurts said in June. It was actually a question that I had asked him about Nick Sirianni, just basically say something nice about the way he has sacrificed, control of the offense to Kellen Moore and what that says about him. And he kind of gave a weird answer, that's a great question. I don't really know what to tell you.
That was your question?
Yeah, that was.
I missed the COVID days where you guys were all on screens and it said who was talking in the press conferences. I need to know who's talking. I didn't know that was your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was and it was pretty much an innocuous one. I'll tell you the truth. Like I was, leading into training camp, I was going to write a feature story about Nick Sirianni giving up control of the offense, and I was just trying to get a quote from Jalen Hurts about it. And then he said what he said, and that was like the last day of spring practice. So you had 6 weeks before you could talk to him again. And then it became like a huge story because everyone's got 6 weeks to dissect what Jalen Hurts meant or didn't mean by what he said and how he, and I think that kind of got the ball rolling with, Tim's story that came out the other day. It's still, I understand what a lot of people are saying as far as the timeliness of it. It's 7 months after the season ended, but they haven't played a game since then. They've changed up their whole offense, with the new coordinator and everything. They brought in a lot of new players. They brought in a lot of new coaches. All of that is an offshoot of what happened last year and how they're trying to move on from that. So until they show that they've actually moved on, I mean, I can see why, it's still kind of a story and still kind of relevant in that regard.
Do you think that, again, and I'm trying to say this in the nicest of ways, this question, that if the article painted a pretty bleak picture, between the relationship of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And we knew it wasn't good. But I almost felt like it was bleaker after reading the article than I even realized. And is there any theory to the fact that if it was as bad as the article made me feel it was, that Nick Sirianni probably shouldn't have been here to begin with this year? So maybe it was bad, but maybe not as bad as the article made me feel it was.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. If you remember after the season ended, like Sirianni was basically twisting in the wind for like a week until they finally held that press conference with Howie and Nick, obviously saying that, Nick is still going to be the coach. But like, look what happened during the course of that week. I mean, Nick had to give up control of the offense. He had to hire a new coordinator who was totally different from, his own philosophy and Kellen Moore. And now he's like a CEO coach and everything. So I think, and I think we've talked about this before also, is, I think Nick knew that if he was going to keep his job, he had to do certain things. And it was kind of like, if you go back to Doug Peterson's last year, after the season ended, he wanted to keep Press Taylor as his offensive coordinator. Jeffrey Lurie wanted, a different voice and everything like that, different assistant coaches. So, they fired Doug. And I think Nick did the opposite. Like, he's like, okay, if I'm going to keep my job, this is what I have to do. And I think that's why he's still the coach. I mean,
do you think it was like Nick Sirianni went to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie like, look, it went bad. This is what I could do to change it, whatever. Or do you think that they went to Jalen Hurts first and went, Jalen, if Nick Sirianni changes, can you stay on the same page? Do you think one, both, maybe all of it kind of all played out over that? Because to me, Jalen Hurts is the $250 million franchise quarterback. If he says, no, I don't want Nick Sirianni here, you got to think Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie would have said, all right, sorry, Nick, you got to go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The quarterback definitely, who's making $250 million, the franchise quarterback definitely has a say in that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all that you said. Obviously if Jalen wanted Nick out, it could have happened. But you see that in any sport. I mean, Bryce Harper, for example, if he doesn't like Rob Thompson and says, I want Rob Thompson out of here, then, maybe they do that. Obviously that's not, let me just throw that out there right now. That's not the case.
Is that one of your sources? Do you have a rumor that's are you breaking news here on the show?
Yeah, exactly. But, maybe that happened with Joe Girardi. I mean, I don't know. But I'm sure John Middleton would like to have Bryce Harper's input. I mean, he's the face of the franchise, just like I'm sure Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, they asked for Jalen Hurts' input. And, maybe this was kind of like how it all transpired. The fact that, would it work if Nick did this, this, and this? And, they all came to agreement saying, yes, it would. And so far it has. So, I think there's a little bit of all that in what you said.
Okay. So let's get to camp. Let's get to the first preseason game. Obviously, they haven't made an announcement on who's playing and who's not playing. There's going to be some bad weather passing through Philly today and tomorrow. So you're obviously not going to see the stars, the Jalen Hurts, the AJ Browns. But I was a guest on another show on Monday, and they were asking me about this similar kind of question. I'm like, the question is, how many of these positional players are actually 100% locked in as starters so that, is Becton or Steen, if they were locked in, they might not play, but they're not locked in. There's a lot of positions still sort of up for grabs in this starting lineup. How many people do you expect to see play, or maybe it's easier to answer, who do you expect not to see play outside of Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and those elite guys?
I think you are going to see both Becton and Steen. I think like a lot of the positions that are up in the air, to some extent, you'll see players. I'm not sure if you'll see Devin White, but you probably will see Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, and behind those guys, Trotter and Van Sumer and those guys at linebacker. I think at cornerback, you're probably going to see everyone except Darius Slay. I would be surprised if Slay played, but there's a battle going on there with Isaiah Rogers and Keely Ringo, and Quinyon Mitchell's been playing a lot in the slot during training camp. Avonte Maddox has been working at safety. Bradbury's been working at safety. CJ Gardner Johnson is probably not going to play because he's been injured, so he hasn't practiced. So, there are going to be a lot of name guys who are going to play. As far as the defensive line, you might see Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis for like maybe a series. I don't know for a fact. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just assuming just because, they probably want to get a little bit of work in, but you're also see like a lot of guys. I can see Bryce Huff playing just because he hasn't done a whole lot in training camp, and they want to see how he does against the run. The offensive line, Lane Johnson, probably not. Mailata, probably not. But, there are a lot of guys they want to look at behind them. Cam Jurgens, I think, will play because, he's taken over for Kelsey. He hasn't had a ton of experience at center. Let's see, where else? Running back, probably no on Saquon Barkley, but yes on all the other guys. Receiver, probably not A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but there are a lot of guys there that they want to look at. Johnny Wilson, Anais Smith, Paris Campbell probably not going to play because he's been injured. John Ross would be someone they'd want to play. He hasn't done a whole lot so far. Britton Covey, obviously, will get a lot of playing time. Joseph Nagata. I think you'll see a lot of name players, just not the top players. Those are the guys you need to keep healthy for the regular season, and especially if it's going to be rainy and wet and all that. I can't see them playing tomorrow.
You mentioned a lot of different names. I want to get your specific opinion on, but you just mentioned Johnny Wilson's name, and Deebs had asked a few minutes ago here your take on him. There's a lot of people over the last 2 or 3 days that now feel that Johnny Wilson might be inching his way towards that wide receiver 3 spot and having a real role on this team, especially with Paris Campbell having been injured for almost the last week now and probably not back anytime soon. Is Johnny Wilson for real? Is he really legitly a threat to be a 3 or a significant contributor as a backup on this offense?
Yeah, I think they like him, especially like in red zone situations. If you're inside the 20, you can throw a fade into the corner of the end zone. He can go up over a 5'11", 6'1" cornerback and get that ball. He's 6'6". He runs like a wide receiver. I think that's what makes him really intriguing to the Eagles. As far as like the number 3 wide receiver position, I think like a lot of people are making that a bigger deal than it is. Like, if A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are healthy and Dallas Goedert's healthy, those guys are getting 80% probably of the targets, no matter what. And actually throw Barkley in there too. So those 4 guys are getting like 80%. So you need like a third wide receiver, somebody who could spread the field. That could be either Paris Campbell or John Ross, whoever sticks, or Anais Smith. He's got a ways to go because he hasn't been very good so far. So, it's kind of like the Quez Watkins role. I know everybody can't stand Quez Watkins and are glad that he left, but he did serve a purpose. Like, he stretched the field and he opened things up for Goddard and Brown and Devontae Smith. And I think that's what they want with a third wide receiver, but I think it's going to be in multiple ways. So, you have the speed factor that one of those, like either Campbell, John Ross, or Anais Smith can provide, but also you also need a guy who can go up and get those 50-50 balls. You could throw it up to, you got 3rd and long and you need, first down, you throw it up in the middle of the field, and a guy like Johnny Wilson can come down and catch that. So, I think they could do the third wide receiver in multiple ways. I think Wilson will definitely have a role in that. And I think one of the other guys will have a role in that too. And another guy to keep an eye on is Britton Covey. He's had a really good camp. He's shown ability to get open over in the middle and stuff. He's not going to stretch the field like, one of the speed guys does, but, maybe he's, some guy who can come up with a clutch catch on 3rd down, something like that. So I think you're going to see that in a number of different ways this year.
Who are the odd men out? I mean, normally they keep about 5 wide receivers.
Yeah.
Last year they only kept 4 right out of camp because Covey started on the practice squad. Right now, I kind of feel like that Smith and Ross are the 2 odd men out right now. I know it'd be hard to imagine him cutting Howie, a 5th round wide receiver, but he hasn't done anything. Like, I kind of feel like these preseason games are really, really, really important for Smith to even make the roster, let alone, have a role on this team.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, these preseason games are bigger for some players than others, and they're definitely huge for Anaya Smith. I think that last spot could come down to either Smith or John Ross. I guess if Paris Campbell doesn't come back relatively soon, he could be in that mix too of players who might not make the squad. But yeah, I mean, Anaya Smith needs to show something because he was coming off. He had a stress fracture last season. He just got cleared for training camp, so he didn't really do much he didn't do anything in the spring, and it's kind of been a slow ramp up for him. And he needs to, this is when you got to show it. I mean, and if he doesn't, I mean, the Eagles obviously taking a risk. You try to get him to the practice squad, another team can claim him. But if he doesn't show anything in the preseason games, maybe another team won't want to put in a claim, and therefore they can get him to the practice squad. So
I love that. I love that battle that probably goes in Howie Roseman's head during cut down days. Well, can I get
yeah,
this player through practice squad or not? Like, I could just sit there imagining him sitting there trying to dissect these players and like, I want them, but I don't want them. You know what I mean? Like, and Howie figures that out. I want to spend a lot of time on some defensive players here with you, but I've got a couple questions on the same name here popping up. So really quickly, there have been a lot of positive reports about Graham Calcaterra from camp and being the number 2 tight end now on this team. Um, as he's had obviously from all reports a good camp, but his weakness was blocking, and the Eagles have always used their second tight end in that blocking role. Multiple people have asked, has Calcaterra's blocking got any better throughout camp this year?
yeah. I mean, that's kind of hard to tell because
Yeah,
they're only in pads. Like they've
yeah.
only been in pads, I think, 4 times so far. And I don't really see the other tight ends as being like great blockers. I know Calcaterra has gotten better over the past couple of years as far as blocking, but I mean, is he going to be a Jack Stahl? Probably not.
Mhm.
Um, and Goddard himself is a good blocker for a tight end. So I mean, I don't think, again, like I would put the second tight end in the same category as the third wide receiver. It's, you're not going to get a ton of targets. If it's short yardage situation, yeah, you could see a role for someone like Calcaterra, and he does have to be a better blocker than he has been. So I mean, we'll find out in the preseason games because that's when you're going against an opponent, and we'll see how he does. He's gonna play a lot. I can't really see Goddard playing much, so yeah, one of those guys is going to have to emerge as a blocker. But Calcaterra has been great as a receiver. Yesterday alone, he had like 3 really good catches during the team drills and everything. He's really been impressive so far.
All right, let's move on to the defense here. We're talking to Martin Frank from DelawareOnline.com, who's been there every practice so far. You mentioned a couple names on the defense and the linebackers. You said that you think that Zach Bond will play on Friday night. To me, he was the first name when I was mentioning names yesterday on the show that I don't think will play. So I think out of all the competitions in camp, I kind of feel like he's locked up that role more than any other competition so far. Um, have you been impressed with how Zach Bond has transitioned over from an outside guy to an inside guy pretty much flawlessly so far from all the reports I've read?
Yeah, he's done a good job. But again, you want to see how he is against an opponent. Like we haven't seen that yet. I mean, it's one thing going against the Eagles offense, and you're not really hitting. It's another thing when it's the Ravens offense, and they're throwing to the receiver, and can he cover? Can he stick with the receiver or not? That's going to be kind of the question. I mean, one thing about Nakobe Dean is, when he was at Georgia, he was a good cover linebacker. He was a little bit undersized, but he could stay with the receiver. Bond is bigger. He's like 6'3", 240. And so far he's shown the quickness to stay with the receiver, but Can he do that in a game? And I think that's why he's going to play, as opposed to someone like Devin White, who, has kind of proven it over the years. He can play inside linebacker. That's always been his position. For Zach Bond, it's a relatively new position. I mean, he's mostly been an edge rusher when he was with the Saints. I mean, he did play a little bit on, inside backer, but I think he might play just because they want to see how he does against an opponent.
Okay. You mentioned Nakobe Dean's name, and funny, Nakobe Dean. I made a comment at the very beginning of camp that this could be his last training camp in Philadelphia because this was such a pivotal year for him at third year in the league. He really hasn't either stayed healthy or been able to get on the field for one reason or another. Now, as camp's going on and on, there's a lot of questionable reports of how he's performing this year. And it's 98.971% not going to happen. But it's kind of crazy. I made a joke the other day, and people actually started taking to it. It's not 100% locked that he even makes the team this year. I mean, he probably will. But, he's actually fighting for something. What seems to be the problem with Nakobe Dean? Is it just literally his size? Is he not grasping the Vic Fangio style of coaching? I had so much hype for Nakobe Dean coming out of Georgia. He was one of my favorite players in that draft, defensively speaking. And I'm just shocked at how he's not taking that next step in his NFL career.
Yeah, we've kind of seen both good and bad from Nakobe so far in training camp. Even Vic Fangio, I think, admitted that the open practice at the link was not one of Nakobe's better days. He was kind of trailing a couple guys in pass coverage, and but then I think it was not yesterday, the day before maybe, he got one of those pseudo sacks. He busted up. He busted Will Shipley into Kenny Pickett and everything. So, he's done some good things. I think he's having a little bit of problem. I think he's having, he's trying to grasp Vic Fangio's defense. It's kind of different for what he's been doing the last couple of years. And, he just got cleared the final week of spring practice from, the foot surgery and everything. So I think it's a combination of all of that. He's still kind of ramping up. But yeah, I mean, he needs to show something. If he's Vic Fangio really likes Zach Bond, and Devin White's going to be one of the starters. I mean, he's pretty much a lock. So, Nakobe's got to show something, and these preseason games are going to be huge for him to do that because, right now, Vic Fangio likes Zach Bond, and Zach Bond seems to be doing the job. And if he can show that.
And of course, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as well. And I forget which reporter put it out there. Somebody from camp that was reporting from camp yesterday put it out there that maybe there's a chance that Trotter Jr. is actually ahead of Nakobe Dean at this point. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit. It was just one person's opinion, but that's why this camp, these preseason games are so important for Nakobe Dean.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far. I mean,
okay.
There was one practice a couple days ago where Trotter got some first team reps, and he looked pretty good. But yeah, I wouldn't go that far as to say he's ahead of Nakobe Dean right now. I mean, I think he's still kind of developing and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's preseason games are big for him too. Obviously, he's going to get probably a lot of the second half, and if he has, he can show something, then maybe that happens. But I don't see it just yet.
All right, the final position group that we got to cover here is obviously, I don't call it the cornerbacks and the safeties. It's just the secondary. It's just the defensive back room because outside of a couple players, Darius Slay, Reed Blankenship, everybody's kind of playing everywhere in the slot, at safety, outside. You've got Ringo, you've got Rogers, you've got everybody with Darius Slay, you've got Quinion Mitchell in the slot. Everybody's everywhere. Who is impressing you most with this playing everywhere style philosophy to earn playing time on this team?
I would start with Quinion. I mean, he's played a lot in the slot, and he's been really good. They like him a lot. And if you go with the philosophy of getting your 5 best defensive backs on the field, he's definitely one of them. So, okay. and what I mean by that is, yeah, he was drafted as an outside corner, but I don't think right now, I mean, obviously you got Slay And I don't know if he's in the pecking order behind Isaiah Rodgers as much, because Isaiah Rodgers has been really good, but he's definitely one of their five top defensive backs. So I can see him playing in the slot, especially to start the season.
Mhm.
And he's shown an ability, like it's a position he's never really played before. Like at Toledo, he was pretty much exclusively on the outside. So I've been impressed with what I've seen there. Isaiah Rodgers and Keely Ringo have had a pretty good battle going on. I would put Isaiah Rodgers in the lead right now, but he's been good. I mean, Keely Ringo showed kind of last year that he could do it, and he's only getting better. Slay still Slay, obviously. The safety situation is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson are the starters, but
Mhm.
you do need a third safety and dime packages, and Bradbury hasn't been that bad. I mean, I know
I
people.
wrote his name down to make sure. I made sure there was only one note for this interview. Is I wrote down James Bradbury's name.
Yeah,
That's it. You know.
I've noticed him, like he's had like two or three pass breakups in practice. I mean, he's a smart guy. Like he's very cerebral. He knows how to play the position, even though he's just learning it for the first time. Like you can see him starting to pick it up, and he's going to play a lot because obviously Gardner Johnson isn't. But hey, at the very least, he can make himself attractive in a trade
Yeah.
situation. So,
The whole philosophy on James Bradbury for me and Avonte Maddox and everybody they've been rotating at safety is that everybody wants to constantly talk about Justin Simmons and everybody's upset he was working out with the Saints. And I didn't see if the Saints signed him or not yesterday. I don't think anybody announced anything after yesterday. But if if they were not at least semi confident in what they had, that Justin Simmons would already
yeah,
be here.
yeah,
There are some rumors starting to float around yesterday that maybe Justin Simmons and Vic Fangio don't necessarily see eye to eye 100%. But that notwithstanding, he would obviously technically be an upgrade over Bradbury and Maddox and whoever else out there. But they're not bringing him in, so that tells me that they've got a plan in place. Because at this point, you're already in the first preseason game. He should be here already if he was going to be in their plans.
yeah. I think that's exactly right. I mean, we also haven't talked about Sidney Brown, who's still
Mm-hmm.
rehabbing from his torn ACL. Cooper DeJean, who
Mm-hmm.
has not practiced yet. He's got the hamstring injury and everything. I mean, they got high hopes for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he's a guy who can play pretty much anywhere on the defense, whether it's outside, nickel, or safety. So, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like a lot, they see nickel and safety as similar in a lot of ways. So, like, if you can do one, chances are maybe you can do another. That's why we've seen Avonte Maddox a lot, with the twos at safety, as opposed to like the nickel spot, which is where Quinion has been playing mostly. Cooper DeJean could be a great nickel cornerback in this league. He could also play safety. So I think they have the depth where they don't need to like go and get someone like Simmons, but it's just a question of how it all shakes itself out. But I think they feel pretty good about what they have in the secondary.
Any thoughts on DeJean and Sidney Brown's injury? When we obviously Sidney Brown's a lot further away to coming back,
Yeah.
but any estimations in your part when we might see those guys actually on the field?
Well, when DeJean suffered the injury, like before training camp, they estimated 3 weeks, and I think
Mhm.
that would be next week, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. And we've kind of seen him off to the side, like starting to do more sprinting and stuff like that, working with trainers and stuff. So, will he be back in time for the last? I don't think he'll play in any. I mean, this is just me talking. I don't. I mean, he definitely won't play next week. Even if he's back like on Monday or Sunday to practice, like I think they would hold him out and maybe the final preseason game. But chances are it might not even be that. So he's going to have to like ramp up pretty quickly, like over those last 2 or 3 weeks before the season starts. So, I don't see him having a big role early in the season. I think it's something that gradually increases as the season goes along. And I think Sidney Brown, I kind of get the sense they want to play it safe with him. Like, I think I can see him starting the season on the PUP list, which means he would have to sit out, the first 4 games. But I think like he'll definitely be back at some point, like within the first month or so of the season, and I think he'll be a pretty big contributor. So, if they could kind of like hold down the fort, I mean, maybe that means that Bradbury stays. Maybe they don't trade him, maybe they don't cut him, maybe he has depth, and then see how it goes from there.
Hey, I'm just praying, Brad. Like I hate being right sometimes, but sometimes I love being right. And I just made a random comment at the start of free agency that James Bradbury was making this team. I just want to be right one time. I just want to be right one time. So that's why I'm cheering for James Bradbury, just to say I was right one time. That's it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I give Bradbury a lot of credit because, after last season, everybody kind of knew he wasn't coming back, and he could have just packed up his things and gone, not reported to spring practices, not reported to training camp, and made it really easy. He could have made it really easy for the Eagles to cut him, and then maybe he can latch on with another team and everything, get a new start. But he's worked hard. He's learned a new position. He even said it was his idea, like, hey, Howie, I had a really bad year. What if I tried playing safety? What do you think of that? And they said, all right, sure.
I love it.
And,
So
at
Martin
the very,
Frank, DelawareOnline.com, NFL. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was saying at the very least, like he at least has kind of made himself, somewhat, I wouldn't say attractive in a trade, but someone who like another team might want to trade for
or another team might just want to keep on their roster.
Yeah. He's a, good guy.
I love it. What's the life of a beat reporter like in training camp? You're going every single day, just like the players, and you finally get a day off like this. Like, it's not even probably a day off. You still probably got articles to write. You still probably got work to do. You're still getting ready for preseason. But today's got to be a nice light day for you, right?
It's a lighter day.
Lighter.
I'm not watching practice and everything. I mean, the great thing about training camp is that the entire practices are open to the media. So we could see stuff that we never get to see once they close it down. Like I would say the last week of August, then it goes into regular season mode. We're only allowed to watch the warm-ups and, maybe some individual drills. So this is like our favorite time of the year because we get to see an entire practice, like what they're working on, like, what the, who's with the ones, who's with the twos and stuff. Like we never get any of that from like late August all the way until May, basically. So I kind of like really enjoy this time of year.
So you don't even want the day off today.
Well, I don't have the day off. I mean, I gotta write stuff for for previewing tomorrow's game, and some other stuff that I'm working on. So, I mean, it's relaxing in the sense that I don't have to, wake up at like 6 a.m, go down to NovaCare Complex, do all the interviews and stuff like that. So it probably saves a good 2 or 3 hours off my day today. But yeah, it's not really a day off.
No days off for an Eagles beat reporter, basically. Then,
maybe February.
Hopefully it doesn't come till after February, right? That's the hope and goal, right?
Late February.
late February, your next day off. Guys, Martin Frank, DelawareOnline.com, MFrank NFL on Twitter. I love it. I love in this day and age with social media, one of the best parts of social media is following guys like you and some of the others and all the camp videos and instant reactions on Twitter. You guys do a great job. You are, like I say, this is not just to praise you for coming on my show, but I love the work you guys do down there, keeping us fans informed of every single thing that's happening. So,
yeah, thank you. It's fun. I mean, that's kind of like the best part of the job is like, seeing that kind of stuff and then, sharing it with the fans and everything, kind of letting them know what's going on with the team. So, yeah, it's the good part of the job, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Martin. Keep up the good work. Let's I can't wait to see what we see this Friday, in the first preseason game and see who shines and who does not.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it as well. And thanks always for having me. I enjoy doing your show, Phil. So keep up the good work yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Guys, make sure you follow this guy, Martin Frank, M Frank NFL on social media, guys. Martin, have a good one, and go Birds for tomorrow.